What's up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be talking about one of the simplest approaches I had that allowed me to push myself as hard as I possibly could while I was racing in the boat. I'm sure people can relate to this. You've noticed that you've been able to push far harder on the erg than you have been in the boat. So you finish a race in the boat and you're not quite happy with it because you maybe felt like you just didn't quite tap into all the potential you had. Maybe you felt like maybe you went 80% or 90% of your max, but and yeah, and then someone beat you and you're maybe like, or you didn't get the result that you wanted, and you're maybe just a bit like, oh, maybe if I was able to push 100%, I'd be able to get the results that I was after. As much as it's not about the results, but I think for me, the more painful thing was just that feeling of I could be a lot faster. But yeah, there's obviously a lot of mindset work that goes into being able to push yourself hard, and a lot of kind of tactics in training, strategy and training around how you approach mindset. I'm not going to go into that in this video. I'm just going to keep it simple with this one thing that worked for me, because it's very coachable as well. It's kind of linked in with the other mindset stuff as well, but yeah, I'll just jump straight into it. But it was just basically having a very clear and simple technical understanding. And yes, that's right. By focusing more on my technique, it allowed me to push harder in the boat. So yeah, let me get into that a little bit. So obviously the erg, it's easier to push because you've not got a tippy platform. You've not got a bunch of other variables to deal with. It's just you and the flywheel. So what we kind of want to think about is how can we recreate that scenario as much as possible in the boat? How can we just make the boat feel like it's an erg? And that comes down to basically just creating yourself a really good platform in the boat that allows yourself to work hard. And it's very specific. And yeah, for me, what specifically worked was one very simple focus at the finish of the strokes when I draw through there, and then one very simple focus at the catch when I floated up into the catch. And they're pretty linked, but I'll just go into it basically. But what it would be, I would just take my blades out square, and again I had two simple cues for each of these points in specific, which I'm going to share. But basically, take my blade out square and then turn it feathered. And that sort of like click. And basically for me, the way I found, again, when we're it's important for you to find your own way of describing these technical cues. But for me, when I was, and yet there's a big thing, like when we're working with athletes, it's like, what works for you? You want to hear it, we'll hear it in their words, so that, because it's far more effective using their language rather than our own in imposing our own ideas. So the same way I'm talking to you about this, don't think it's a be all end all. Find the big thing for this to work is for it to be simple, and for it to be clear, and for it to work for yourself. But anyways, what I would think about is just that click feeling. And if I knew, like, when I popped the blade out at the finish, if I could feel that nice like loose click in the collars and hear that click there, it meant when I would draw through, I would sit up and I'd be nice and loose in the arms, and I would take the blades out really cleanly. And if I would do that, if I take the blades out cleanly, what it allowed me to do was have a really, really clean and tidy platform off the finish that I could then slide forward on. And again, for me, that was just something, if I knew to search for that feeling and get that loose click at the finish, that it would set up the second part of the stroke really well. And then the second part of the stroke, very simple and very related. It was how I would go into the front and how I'd prepare with my blades going into the front, and how I would pick up the boat. And obviously that's the most important part of the stroke, is how do you pick it up and how do you get connected and how do you push and how do you not disrupt the run of the boat. If you watched any of my technical videos before, you'll be very aware of all the stuff that I go on about all the time. It was a running joke when we were on training camp, that I basically was repeating a lot of this stuff, but very simple. It's square your blade early enough so that you can get to the front. And the mistake that people make is, you leave the squaring of the blades late, and right when you get out to to the widest part of the catch, you just go right square and in. And all this shit that you're doing here, it just takes the load up there, and it becomes so difficult to row well, and you fatigue up here, then your arms get sore and you can't row properly. So the way around that is if you just square your blades early enough. Simple. Like, just square. It's literally that simple. Square your blade earlier, and that will then give you that time where you can relax and be still going into the front. And if you can be relaxed and still going into the front, you can focus more on the placement and how you put the blade in. When you get that nailed, you get really nice and connected, and it's a much better platform to push off of. So those two things. And yeah, if you get the good connection, it's much easier to drive through, and you come through really strong, and then that just ties in with the finish, and then you're back to. So basically, the way I would go about thinking about this, and again, this is how I would do visualization, which is a whole nother like training in its own way. I'd think about click here, click there. That's literally it. And I would just imagine myself doing that every stroke. And every time on the recovery, I would assess, did I click at the finish and did I click at the catch? And what I noticed is I was just able to work so much harder because I had a really good platform to drive off of. And because, in the same way that it's easier to work hard on the erg, when you get this right, it's actually easier to work hard in the boat. It's easier to work hard in the boat because you're so focused and there's so much energy and excitement going on that you end up working really, really hard without even realizing it, and you finish the race and you're like, holy shit, I'm tired. Click, simple. If you found this useful, a bit shorter, but again, like to keep it, that's kind of the whole point, is that it's that simple. So do that when you race, and it will work, and you'll be able to push yourself harder. Like and subscribe.